quick preamble before we start the episode. Guess what? Yes, it's season 4 and we are back. Thank you so much for your patience. We've gotten a lot of comments being like, what the heck's going on with y'all? We've just been crazy busy, but we are very, very, very excited to get back into this. And we have a whole season and a brand new sponsor, Scientific Anglers, who has been so cool to us. You'll learn more about that later. But I just wanted to check in and say thank you for your patience. Yo, I'm Pablo.
And this is Lance, and you're listening to
the Noob and the Knower Fly Fishing Podcast. In this podcast, we pair a driven angler with a seasoned professional to take you from total noob to a fly fishing nerd.
Yeah, we cover reading water, gear, fishing techniques, and much, much more.
With Mr. Lance Egan, star of hit video series Modern Nymphing, Fly Fishing Team USA medalist, and professional guide.
That's right, and here co-hosting, asking the questions on your behalf, is avid fly fisher and outfitter owner Pablo Signori.
So now, let's hit the water. Fish on.
Fish on.
We're back. The Noob and the Knower Podcast. How we doing, Lance?
Pretty dang good. How about yourself? Todo bien?
Pretty good. A little bit traumatized because this is the second time that we're recording this podcast. And on the second time, we were having technical difficulties again, which is kind of insane.
We did switch up our techs, so we have some excuses.
That should be proof enough to the listeners that we're making no money off this. Because we had to switch to FaceTime because we didn't want to pay for a Zoom subscription. But that was part of my new sort of thing where I'm like, I want to start purging all these subscriptions that I don't really need to use the way I use them.
Sure.
It's like all of my meetings that are on Zoom, someone else is hosting. So I was like, I can get rid of this. When we went to record, I was like, oh, actually, I need Zoom for the podcast. So there's that. So we tried FaceTime. If anyone listening works at Apple, I just want you to know that there's a major glitch with FaceTime. Number one, it's impossible to get anything to start. We're sending the links back and forth and they're just not working. And then when I use my DAW to record, the minute I start recording, for whatever reason, my mic input loses all its gain. It's like a really weird glitch. Doesn't make any sense. And I'm not a noob when it comes to audio, so pretty sure it was not human error this time. That's my 2 cents. Just venting here at the beginning of the podcast.
Definitely was not working properly.
No. But moving on, today we have a really fun podcast and first podcast of the new season, if you can believe that. Season 4. Maybe we're not as prolific as some of the other podcasts out there, but at least we're reliable. You can always come back and eventually we'll have something new for you.
You can count on us every 1 to 6 months.
Exactly. So today we're going to be talking about something that's quite personal to me personally. Makes sense, doesn't it?
Well said.
Hey, you know what? I'm a little rusty too. I'm not going to lie. You know, there comes a point in the fly fishing journey where you are on a parabolic curve and you start little and you keep growing and growing and growing and growing and growing and growing, and you reach a point in that curve where you start to plateau. I think it happens to a lot of anglers in like year 3, 4, 5, maybe further. And there's multiple versions of this, you know, like you'll plateau and then you kind of figure something out and then you go up a little bit and then you plateau again and it becomes a staircase instead of like a skate ramp. But for me personally, I have had some sort of aha moments this year with plateauing and unplateauing. It kind of kicked out this idea where I was like, hey, we should do like a top 10 ways to level up if you've plateaued. So we're assuming at this point, you know, season 4, if you're an avid angler, maybe you've plateaued or you're worried that you might. If you're a beginner, there's still a lot to glean from this because you'll be like, oh, well, now I know how to avoid it further on in my career, fly fishing. So we're going to do 2 parts. We're going to do some philosophical things that I've come up with that are related to plateauing. It's like the mental game, and then the physical game, which will be the more pragmatic tips. Now, there might be people out there that might be kind of annoyed with us for doing this.
You suck, bro.
Which is fine, because certainly a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about could potentially take the fun out of fishing on the daily, you know? And by no means are we telling people to not have fun when they fish.
It's temporary.
It's a temporary non-fun so that you unlock things that will allow for fun later. If you want to get better at something, at some point, something has to give. And that something is in the minutia, right? I'm going to give an example that's been part of what's been happening with me personally with a different sport that I'm into, which is climbing. If anyone climbs out there or they don't, basically, there's a technique to it, and you learn certain ways to position your body and transfer your weight, or grips, or foot technique, and where to put your feet on a hold and how to do it, drop knee, and all these different things. And what can end up happening is your technique will take you pretty far, actually, and you'll start climbing some harder routes, and you'll start to feel pretty good. But there's going to get to a point where typically you will plateau. And that plateau is where people need to start actually like working strength training and going to the gym and like building muscle to sort of break through that. Since I'm just like skin and bone,
join the club.
I've been using technique for the past 3 years. I should say skin, bone, fat.
Also join the club.
I kind of reached the point where I'm like climbing V4, V5 in the bouldering gym, and like, 11 C's in sport climbing. And now I need to sort of start working out. Now, TBD if I'm actually going to do it, but I've plateaued and I know why. And I feel like the same thing happens in fly fishing. It's like you learn how to cast, you learn a technique really well, you're comfortable wading, or, you fish for multiple species and you're starting to get comfortable like as a well-rounded angler, which we're always trying to get people to be.
Right.
But then things kind of like end there, and your catch rate doesn't go up necessarily. At a certain point, it sort of stays the same. That's kind of where you have to start doing the heavy lifting workout stuff, in my analogy, which is the hardest part because it's the stuff that's not fun actually a lot of times. But hopefully after we go through this list, you'll be like, okay, well, a few of these are not that fun. Casting practice, I should say.
Very fun. You be quiet.
It is actually fun. I love doing it. And I have something really cool to talk about later, because we're going to put casting on the list, clearly.
Has to be.
There's no spoiler alert there. If you didn't know that going into this episode, then clearly you have not been listening to this show. But hopefully we'll make this kind of fun for you so that you can at least be in good spirits when you're doing the daily slog of trying to level up. So let's jump in here. The first thing I want to talk about is under this philosophical sort of mind game. I've been thinking a lot about this. I've been spending a lot of time working on myself in the last year. And full disclosure, mainly it's because I suffer from anxiety. And I know I have it, so I've just been taking things to my own hands, trying to sort of fix it. A lot of it comes from the fact that I'm in a moment of change in my life, and I think maybe there's some genetics in there too, but it's actually made me pay attention a lot more to myself, my mind, my body, to see like what's causing it, what are the things in my life that I'm doing that could be amplifying it and whatnot. So through that journey, it got me sort of thinking about the things that I do regularly a different way. It's sort of actually unlocked my plateau of like regular everyday living. So the first thing on the list that I have here is to do things with intention. And the first time we recorded this podcast last week, I discovered that Lance calls it be deliberate. It's interesting that it's something that, Lance, you kind of talk about also and just frame it in a different way. Mm-hmm. But the point is, every time you do something when you're fishing, try and do it with intention. When you make a cast, make an effort to hit a specific target each cast. Find a really finite point, try and hit it. When you tie your knots, make an effort to tie them cleanly and seat them perfectly. And if they're not, clip it and retie, and just do it until you can. When you snag and you have to re-rig 14 times, make sure that on the 14th time, you put as much love into the rig as you did on the first time, which is really hard, as we all know.
Right.
But that's the whole point. It's you do things with intention. On that 14th time, when you have to redo your entire rig, instead of losing your mind, you're like, okay, well, this is an opportunity to make it even better than the first time. And maybe like before you leave or on an outing or something, you set specific goals for yourself. The whole point is that you're really paying attention to the minutia and like what you're doing in the present.
You have to be, as you mentioned, I like to use the word deliberate. You have to be very deliberate about those things. And I would even add, I like all the things you said. I would even add some of those, like tying knots, for instance, are things you can do when you're not fishing. You can practice, grab some crappy tippet or just go to the local Walmart or whatever, sporting goods store, and buy some inexpensive fishing line and just work on knots just for speed. You're not really even worrying about worried too much about the strength of them because you might not have great material, but just your finger positioning and, your efficiency at tying those knots and re-rigging and things that make all of your time on the water better. Same with casting. You said, be deliberate about those things. It's not enough to just go and cast in the park. You got to be like you're working on accuracy, or you're working on distance, or you're working on aerial mends, or you're working on loop control, or you're throwing different weights of rods, or you're working on a double haul, and on and on and on. Have a goal in mind. Don't just go and fling the fly around for no apparent reason.
I mean, we'll get into casting later, but I've even been thinking about that, paying really, really close attention to like what each section of your fly line is doing within the cast. So when I've been practicing, I'm like, okay, how is my loop on my back cast? And only paying attention to that. And then I'll be like, how is my loop on my forward cast? And only paying attention to that. Or how is like the top third of my line? What does it look like when it hits the water? And really trying to be deliberate about getting it to do the exact same thing over and over and over again and without any variance, which is actually really hard,
Right.
That's kind of what we mean by do things with intention. Instead of just like, you can just go cast and practice casting, but when you're practicing it, if you want to level up, which is the point of this, is actually get more detailed with the activity, not just doing the activity.
Yeah. Put a little thought into it, right?
Yes, exactly. So the next one is sort of tangential to the first one, but different altogether at the same time. I'm starting to sound like Yoda over here. Practice awareness. Pay attention to the present. So, doing things with intention is sort of before you're doing the thing, you're sort of planning to pay attention to something. Practicing awareness is paying attention to the present. While you're actually doing the action, you're paying close attention to not just the obvious things, but the things in and around the action. For instance, how are you breathing when you cast? This has been a big one for me because I realized when I was climbing that I hold my breath through the hardest part of the climb, which you should not do. And then I was like, I wonder if I'm doing that when I'm casting, and I was. So now one of the things I've been practicing is actually trying to breathe at a regular pace through my cast, which has been kind of nuts, but really good for my casting. It's gotten so much smoother, which is just interesting. But yeah, so think about it. Do you hold your breath on your back cast? Do you exhale on your forward cast? When you set the hook, are you using your whole torso or just your arm? Is your body tight? Is your bicep tight? Or is it more of a holistic motion that starts in the hips and ends at the end of the rod? Like, these are all things that you can actually like think about while you do. And while it may seem sort of like overkill, I think it's not. It's like really how you get really good, I think, is by actually dissecting every motion that you're doing, especially if you're trying to be very accurate, Or when you're tracking nymphs in your run, how are you gripping the rod? Because we're paying so much attention to a sighter or some sort of strike indicator, and we probably aren't really thinking about how we're holding the rod, or how tight the grip is, or how tight your bicep is or your shoulder muscle is when you're tracking Euro nymphing, which are all things that are important that will influence things down the line. Or when you're following a dry fly on the water, or a light colored streamer that you can see as you strip, are you only looking at the fly, or are you looking at the area around it where a fish might ambush from? It's just paying attention to sort of everything, being aware of everything around you. And that's a big one too. That last one sort of implies not just paying attention to the thing that's like right in front of you, but sort of paying attention to the stuff that's like in your peripheral vision also,
Right.
Sounds and the way things look around what you're doing, which is, again, very meta, but I think it's one of those things that will teach you a lot about what you're doing. What do you feel about that, Lance? Is that too out there?
Present you must be. Yes.
That was really good.
That was terrible. I'm not really a Star Wars nerd, but that one, I was sitting on that one for a second.
It stinks that no one could see your face when you did it.
Yes, it's better that way. Yeah, I had to strain a little to get that voice. I'm with you. Those, you have to be present. You have to be noticing things. If you ever fish, if you get a chance to fish with a really highly skilled fly fishing guide, if you're paying attention to what they're doing, let's say you're with a drift boat guide and you're on the river and you have one angler in the front and one angler in the back. Any guide that's really good will be very adept at keeping track of what both anglers are doing. They have like this sixth sense of being able to see both, like if you're both fishing dry flies, they'll see both flies at the same time, it seems like, because half the time one of the people sleeping on the job, one of the anglers is sleeping on the job, and the guide will be like, Pablo, set, and you're like looking up at the cliff walls or something and looking at a bird flying overhead, and he's got his eyes on both of those things, and that's just their sixth sense of being totally present, being totally dialed into what's going on. Or I fish a lot out of my drift boat with friends and with just one friend at a time, where we have one guy on the oars and one guy fishing, and we try and make it a real goal that the guy rowing is, the angler obviously is looking for risers or whatever, but we tend to fish mostly dries out of the boat, and the person rowing, one of their jobs is, it's kind of unsaid, it's unspoken, but it's just expected that they are rowing and, of course, keeping everybody safe, but also always looking for risers, especially on, like, if we're fishing river right, the oarsman might be checking out river left, or might be looking further downstream than where we're fishing currently, just to say, okay, I just saw a fish rise, third point of bushes sticking out river right, about 3 feet off the bank, make sure you get a shot in there, sort of a thing. And those are just all examples of being present. If you're on a bonefish flat, the guide's going to be spotting stuff, looking around 180 degrees all the time. And if you hear a fish splash out to the side, their eyes are going to be peeled to whatever. They're going to try and find the nervous water and figure out what just made that little disruption in the water. Again, just being present and really paying attention to what's going on.
And within this philosophical section, like I said, the first one, do things with intention, is as you're about to start doing whatever thing you're working on. The second one, practice awareness, is what you're doing in the present. And then this last one is what you do in the future, which is review yourself. That's the last one in this sort of little list that I've created here. And it ties to the awareness, but of course it's after the fact. A lot of productivity gurus harp on the importance of going back and reviewing the outcome of specific life events or large swaths of time, like a yearly review. Maybe they keep a journal or a log or a mental catalog of how things are going. But most people, when you start paying attention to this stuff, pun intended, they will talk about reviewing yourself. I've been doing a lot of this productivity work, and a lot of people will be like, on Fridays, go back and review everything that you've done that week and see what you have or haven't accomplished, so that you can be set up for the following week to get those tasks done.
Right.
Easier said than done. But I think it's a good thing to do with your fishing also. And I wanted to sort of reference Devin Olson, your teammate from Fly Fishing Team USA, who is also in your videos, Modern Nymphing Masterclass, but he keeps a log of how the championships go when he goes to Worlds, and then he puts them on his website, on his blog. So you can kind of read his notes, basically, his review of after fishing. And I think a lot of people do that. Not everyone puts them out on a blog, but
Sure.
like a lot of people will go back and review. And I think it's just a great thing to do. And by keeping a log, you can always go back also and sort of, well, there's a bunch of things, but you can go back and see what worked when it did or didn't back in the day. But you can also see your progress, because it's like a progress report of sort of how you're evolving as an angler.
Yeah.
And if you want to listen to these guys talk about the World Championships, actually we did in season 3, episode 4 and 5, there was a wildly popular series of episodes that we did with Pat Weiss and Devin Olson from Fly Fishing Team USA. So if you're interested in the World Championships, that would be a good one to check out. But did you keep a log when you were competing in Worlds?
Yeah. Worlds and most of our regionals, I always had, I would keep notes at the end of each practice day, and then I would kind of create venue notes, for me to just, because sometimes even just over a week or two of pre-fishing, everything starts to kind of glom together, which flies worked where. And
Yeah.
oftentimes each fishery would have unique things that stood out, water types that produce fish that weren't found in other places, or specific fly patterns that were standout. What else? My take on the rivers, things that you're seeing hatching, things to be prepared for. And yeah, I have notes from lots of those. And in the case of World Championships, only a few of the countries and venues did we go to more than once in my tenure on the team. But certainly in our domestic competitions, I have lots of notes from, several places that were outside of my normal home waters, let's call them, where, you jot down flies that worked, again, water types, things to watch for, things that you heard that other anglers were experiencing, all of that had as just stuff that you can log away in some notes. And a lot of it you'll remember, but I think you'd be amazed if you jot it down how much of it, when you go and revisit it 2 or 3 years later, how much of it you don't retain actually.
I mean, that happens to me a lot. I'll write things down and I'll be like, why am I doing this? I'm totally going to remember. And then like a week later, I'm like, wait, what was I?
Yeah, especially if you're not doing it routinely. For me, at least, if I do something a lot of times, I get pretty used to it and can retain it a little easier. You know, if the same fly works on the same river over and over and over, that's not hard to remember. But if you've got, you had one particular time frame, spring on a particular venue that an Iron Lotus, let's say, really worked well, you'd want to log that away because you may not remember that sort of thing. Yeah, that's definitely worthwhile. I would also suggest maybe videoing yourself. I know when I used to guide, sometimes when I had new Euro clients especially, I would sometimes video them at the beginning of the outing, just watching their casting stroke and casting capabilities, and then do it again kind of in the last hour or two of the day, and you could kind of show them their progression. I often do that when I've done casting classes as well. Just, it's interesting to have people watch themselves cast, because I think a lot of times what we think we're doing in our head, when they actually see themselves on film, they realize, wow, that's, you keep telling me to keep my rod tip up on the back cast, and that's because I've got it almost parallel to the ground behind me. And you're like, yeah, that's what I've been telling you for the last hour. Now look at it.
Yeah, everybody's 10 and 2 is more like 8 and 5.
For sure. Yes. But it is interesting to log those things away, and you can chart some progress there. You can also, pick apart some faults, and it's a little bit, you have to put yourself out there a little if you're going to put yourself on film and let anybody else watch it. But if you're only letting yourself watch it, there's no harm, no foul, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it's a really good thing to do. And I was even writing, some of the examples that I had were, because these are things that will for sure affect your fishing. It's like things as esoteric as, what mood were you in when you left your house to go fish? And did that affect your day in the long run? Were you able to focus fully on fishing, or were you checking your email and text the whole time? How did you feel on the drive back? Satisfied, unsatiated, disappointed, ecstatic? Like, think about the events that led up to that, and it'll give you knowledge on how to repeat what worked and what didn't. And also be honest with yourself and your limitations or procrastination or whatever it might be. Like if you're dunking fish and you're really proud of yourself, but it's like on the same stretch of river that you do every single time, it doesn't really mean like you're pushing yourself to your maximum capabilities,
Right.
So like that's also a good part of the reviewing process, is sort of like asking yourself the hard questions. Okay, such and such happened, but was it because I was being easy on myself, or vice versa? Was this a terrible day, but it was a terrible day because I was pushing myself out of my comfort zone,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of points to one thing that is sort of not really part of this, but I think it's worth mentioning, is just we're so obsessed with like the result, the fish,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a real power to like being able to strip yourself of like that necessity to have that happen. Clearly you want confirmation that you're doing things right. So like,
Sure,
catching fish is important. But I think the hard part about today's talk is that by doing a lot of this stuff, at first you'll catch less fish. So it sort of does put you in that comfort zone where you're not stroking your ego. Actually, you're sort of making yourself feel bad about yourself.
Yeah.
But it's only because you're learning something new.
Totally.
That's like sort of like the price that you pay for unlocking to the next level.
Agreed.
So keep that in mind also. I've been trying to be way more open to not getting my perceived goal, but finding goals on the road there that are sort of milestones,
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So that kind of covers the super metaphysical, psychological, philosophical side of this sort of lesson we're learning today. Let's keep moving. And there's an in-between one that I have between the pragmatic and the more esoteric here. So the in-between one is, quite frankly, don't just Google things, try and figure them out on your own. But it means exercising patience and being more of an observer than a doer, and that's kind of the big takeaway on all of the philosophical stuff. It's like observe in every phase of your fishing. And I think that it also builds confidence because you have answers to your whys, because you're paying attention. So you start to have build self-trust as an angler because you're paying attention to things and you're like, okay, I know why this happened because I was paying attention that time. It's like
Yeah.
if you're fishing streamers or something on a lake and you're counting on a sinking line how deep it's getting every time, and then you catch a fish at 8 seconds, you're like, and you do it again, why, because you were paying attention and you counted. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you have a little understanding of what's going on.
Exactly. So that's kind of the in-between. Don't just Google things. Try and figure them out on your own. Which, by the way, will be contradicted in this next section coming up. Okay, so let's move on to the more pragmatic things on the list, and there's more of them, of course. I was going to keep you guys on a hill in Tibet for the entire episode. We're moving now to things that are more tangible. So the first thing on my list, which I think is a very obvious one, if you want to level up your game, and it actually plays into all the stuff we just spoke about, it's invest time in new water and fish more often, right?
For sure.
Fish more often, try new places, rivers, lakes. Also, fishing new places will help you experience various waters. And since they're all unique, fish can vary in their holding water based on species, time of year, water temp, hatches, availability of food, etc. That was Lance's notes when we were going through this, but it's true. So spending more time on the water allows for more time to do the first things that we spoke about, but it also just... That's like the easiest thing that you can do in theory to level up, right? Is just do it more.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Well, one of the anecdotal things I would add to that, just in my competition career, one of the things that I noticed in our domestic anglers, the U.S. anglers, since I spent lots of time around them, Fly Fishing Team USA usually has 15 members on it with after each cycle based on points. Whoever are the top 15 points earners make Team USA, okay? Only 5 of which compete in the World Fly Fishing Championships. And I would argue that most of those 15 anglers have fairly similar skill sets. Not all exact, of course. They vary a little, but very similar skill sets. They have a lot of similar understanding. Not the only, but one of the biggest differences I saw in, let's say, that the competitors that consistently place in the top 3 or 5 was that they spent a lot of time on the water, with very, very few exceptions. The folks that made the world team year in, year out were spending at minimum 2 days a week on the water, and often more than that. And the next tier of anglers down were more like sometimes 2, more often 1 or once every other week type of anglers. Still very good anglers, had a lot of experience, and maybe in other parts of their life, when they were younger or whatever, when they didn't have kids, or they didn't have as many responsibilities, or they had a different job, or they were without a job, or who knows what. They spent a lot of time on the water at one time, but maybe not as consistently currently. And I think you can just kind of see that trickle down. In the fly fishing industry, we often joke in the shop and as guides and things about anglers tell you they've been fishing. Oh, I've been fishing for 60 years. And you're like, oh, that's cool. That's a really cool thing to say, except it doesn't mean a lot unless you give a little more qualifying questions to that. Did you fish once a year for 60 years? Or did you 60 times wouldn't be as much as, a very skilled angler often fishes in 6 months, right?
Right.
So, saying something like that doesn't mean a lot. Another fun one is when people say, oh yeah, I fish Alaska and everywhere. And you're like, okay, so you go where the fishing's really easy. The fish are spawning and they're dumbed down. And yeah, that's not very telling of your skill set, but okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyhow, that doesn't help a lot. We need some qualifying questions.
Yeah, I agree.
So just being out on the water a lot is a way to level up. You're going to get more experience. You're going to understand more things. Again, if you only fish in the summer, well, you might have a pretty good understanding of what happens in the summer, but during shoulder seasons and in the winter, you might be, up creek without a paddle. You don't really have any idea what to do, what water types to find fish in, and so on. So just having that experience, that's consistency on the water, is going to level you up in and of itself. There's ways to make that even more efficient, but just simply spending more time on the water. If Pablo and I were doctors, we'd give you a prescription to at least fish once or twice a week.
How often are you fishing typically?
Typically in the wintertime, I'm once or twice a week. Most weeks I'm twice. In the summertime, when we have longer days and things, then I'm pretty much always twice, and sometimes can sneak in a third or fourth, not full day, but evening or morning or something like that.
Nice. Yeah, that's a big one. I mean, I can tell you, from my own experience, when I was fishing very often is when I was the best. And now that I'm not, I'm not as good as I was. I mean, full stop. It makes sense. It's really simple. Just fish more, and sometimes that means making sacrifices. When I was fishing a lot, I was waking up at like 5 a.m. and I would fish for 3 hours, and then I would come home and have a regular day,
Sure.
And it's like, I'm not fishing a river. I'm just fishing, the harbor here. So it's a totally different thing, but at least I was casting a rod and there was the potential chance of catching a fish, It's tough fishing, but you do catch fish. So I totally agree, man.
As silly as it sounds, you have to just, if you want to level up in that regard, you have to make it a priority because there's a million other things in everyone's life that can, eat up time, right?
Yeah.
We have customers every week that come in and ask me if I've been fishing, and I always tell them the same thing. Yeah, always a little, never enough, and I usually ask them the same question. How about you? You've been fishing?
Oh, no, I got, too much work to do. I got my kids are, in sports right now. Oh, no, I just don't have time right now.
Okay. Nobody has time really, but you have to carve it out. You got to make it.
It's like anything. You gotta put the reps in,
Yes.
What's that, the 10,000 hours tipping point?
To master anything.
Yeah, but actually I think that was debunked, the 10,000 hours thing. But
was it?
Yeah, because they were doing studies on violinists, and there's like some violinists that are just like crazy good, and they hadn't been playing that long.
I think there's always an element of natural ability of some sort, right? Not everybody has the same musical ear or the same hand-eye coordination in that case, or there's all kinds of variables. But yeah,
not everyone's a freak like you. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I agree.
Like me, I'm not a freak. I wish I were. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, right. Yeah, bronze medalist, team medalist, individual medalist. Come on now.
Yeah, there's some luck involved in there.
I don't know about that.
I do. I'm certain.
I guess you would know better than I would.
Truth be told, there is some luck in it for sure, and there's lots of. We don't have to go down that tangent, but there's definitely some skill involved, but there also has to be some things that fall in line for you.
That's a great podcast in of itself. Can you practice luck? Think about that one, people. DM us with your opinion. No, please don't.
No, don't.
All right, so the next one is something you've been dying to talk about. I could tell from before, and it's learning new techniques.
Learning new techniques. I'm always dying to talk about that.
Yes, you are. And so I had mentioned that I have been getting into climbing for the last 3 years, and I started reading this book because I'm trying to level up. And so the book is The Rock Climber's Exercise Guide by Eric Horst. He's a really famous dude. But the point is, I wanted to give a quote here about it because I think it applies to this conversation, and he says it very well. Now, keep in mind, he mentions climbing here, so just, Mad Libs it and put in fly fishing. But he says, while specializing will foster rapid gains in one of these sub-disciplines, long-term improvement requires that you continue to gain experience and add skills in a wide range of climbing and rock types. There is a synergistic feedback effect that benefits those who strive for all-around proficiency as rock climbers. So I think it's true. By working on more than just one technique and going back to us, we're always harping on it, is trying to be a well-rounded angler, it just leads to bigger gains. It's easy to just focus on one thing and make that your thing and feel like a hero from it. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I do think there's a way to do it where you're doing phases of things, like maybe you're really into Euro nymphing for one season and the next one you get into streamer fishing or whatever it might be.
Sure.
But I think the overall sort of long-term goal should be to sort of diversify your portfolio and grow,
Agreed. Yeah. Dedicate some time to something new. As we kind of hit on a little bit earlier, this is going to likely cause you some, not in every case, but in many of the cases, you may not catch as many fish for a few outings, right? Let's say you're really dialed into a local tailwater fishery and no matter how you like to nymph it, doesn't matter if you want to indicator it, you want to tight line it, you want to Euro nymph it, whatever it is you want to do that you're really confident in, you're going to go every time and catch fish doing that, I have no doubt. But if you really want to level up, you probably need to leave the nymph box home and just say, I'm going today and for the foreseeable future, I'm going with just my dry fly box, or I'm going with just streamers. I'm going to just go swing wets. I'm going to, whatever it is you want to tackle, that next technique and that next water, you got to just leave whatever your safety blanket is, your little comfort zone, and get out of that and just do something different, and that's likely to cost you some fish for a few outings. But long term, it's going to help you have greater understanding of something new that will then probably open up new water types you didn't know were held fish, or maybe a new casting technique, or it's going to force you to look at water differently because you're going to be fishing a technique that maybe you need to fish deeper, or you need to fish shallower, or something like that. In one way or shape or form, it's going to change everything that you do on the stream because of the technique change that you're doing. And this also relates to water types. Like if you only ever fish one river, you're going to know that river intimately, but you only know the fish habits of that river. What do they feed on there? What water types do they favor? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Where if you go to a different river, even if it's just one drainage over, it can be completely different. They can have the majority of the food that's available can change. The species of fish could change. If I go back to my Team USA examples, and I recognize that most people listening here have zero interest, and I really emphasize zero because I know most people don't have any interest in competing, and I totally understand that. But just using it as an example, the anglers that had a large variety of species and waters around them tended to be better competitors.
Oh, wow.
The competitors that come from live in an area where they maybe only have one or two rivers and they're mostly stocked fish, of the same species, they can become a very good angler, but then throw them into, let's say they're stocked rainbows where they live, and you send them to a wild brown trout or a place where there's browns and cuts or whitefish and cutthroat or rainbows that are not stocked, and all of these variables get thrown at them, and all of a sudden they're a fish out of water. They really don't know what they're doing with that new experience they're encountering. And the anglers that have, brown trout, rainbow trout, cuts, brookies, whitefish, grayling, even smallmouth, largemouth, carp, bass, pike, you name it, everything, any species you can add to your list can help you understand a little more about a specific situation. And again, you're adding all of that to your memory banks and your knowledge base to allow you to kind of level up your game in many, many facets.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to what you said at the top of your diatribe here, I think leaving the tools that you fall back on as a crutch, leaving those things at home or at least in your car far away from you is kind of the only way to do it, because you're gonna go back to it. Like, it's so hard not to be like, yeah, well, this is kind of getting old. I'm just gonna go back to doing what I know.
100%.
I think it was 2 years ago or last year, I was like, all right, I'm going to get really into like wet flies. I want to learn how to fish them proper. And I was, I was reading a lot about it, and I went on a trip with my buddies I think it was to my brother's house actually. And they came up and met us. And, the first day I was like, well, it was kind of a weird situation because the water was like yoo-hoo colored and like swollen the entire time we were there. It was terrible, terrible, terrible fishing.
Tough conditions for that.
Yeah, but I still was like, I'm still going to try. I very quickly abandoned it. I just felt so uncomfortable fishing that way. And now I regret it. It's like I fished the way I knew and we barely caught any fish because the water sucked,
Sure.
But maybe I should have taken that time to continue working on that technique, at least getting the drifts right and feeling the casting and sort of positioning and everything that goes along with that style of fishing. I would have walked away a better angler, but, I didn't do it.
Sure.
So I think it's a really good point. And it's something that, we've said before, and we say it all the time as far as like being a well-rounded angler, trying new techniques. But the one thing that I think we haven't mentioned is sort of the things that you don't think about that aren't as obvious. Like you talked about going to a different part of a river or a different watershed altogether and trying something. But what might actually happen is you learn something there and you bring that back to what you're normally at, and you're like, oh, wow, like
100%.
I'm catching fish I've never caught in my own watershed now because I did this thing and it showed me something,
Right.
So that's the other cool thing about it, is that pushing yourself out of your comfort zone actually unlocks things in your comfort zone as well.
One more thing I might add to that is you can use, the old lemonade out of lemons, right? If you get to the river and you were hoping to fish dry flies or something, rather than tucking your tail and going home, maybe use that as an opportunity. Say, okay, I had hoped to go fish, the caddis hatch or the PMD hatch or whatever it was that you'd been experiencing before. But today the river blew out for whatever reason, rain, snow, who knows what it is. Rather than just wrapping it up, let's look at that and go, okay, what can I take away from this? What can I learn from this? And maybe, let's say maybe you're not a very experienced stream wrangler. Maybe you look at that slightly higher, slightly off-color water that's not likely to produce a great hatch, but you go, okay, how can I figure out how to catch fish in this situation? Mm-hmm. And then the next time you encounter it, you won't be so distraught when, things are not looking up as far as what you had in mind to do. You can go, all right, this is cool. Last time this happened, I went and I threw a dark streamer or, a bright colored streamer, depending on what the water conditions are dictating. And I covered certain water types, and some of them didn't produce, but I found water types that did produce. And so I have some experience in this water type now. Now I know what to do when the water's high and it's off color. I have experience in this field. And I'm going to go make some lemonade out of the lemons that I was dealt today.
I love it. That was my lemonade squish sound.
I love the lemons.
Lemon tree, very pretty. I'm going to have to cut this out because I don't want to get busted for copyright infringement.
I don't think you sound a lot like him.
Damn, shots fired.
All the leaves are brown. So one other thought that comes to mind, Pablo, is when I think back on some of my guiding, and when I think about talking to folks in the shop quite often, most people are really convinced that the fly is what's keeping them from catching fish. And I would argue most of the time, the fly obviously can have an impact, but most of the time it's their presentation that I think is holding them back. So one of the things that I think will help most people really level up is just learning to achieve dead drifts, which sounds really simple. But if you get really, really good, and I'm still learning it myself, so don't let me sound like I know all about it. But if you, having spent hundreds of hours watching other people fish, if not thousands of hours watching other people fish, I'm amazed at how often people will throw, especially a dry fly, sometimes a nymph rig as well, in a very particular lie that how holds fish, and they'll go, oh, I can't believe nothing ate it in there. And I'm watching it going, well, I have a pretty good idea. It's because it had some drag on it, and they're not recognizing that at all. Mm-hmm. And I find that in the store and on the water, people just really don't understand what a true dead drift is. I have conversations every day in the shop about this time of year, especially. It's wintertime. We're moving into spring. We start to get midge hatches. We start to see blueing olives, but we're fishing dry flies, which is nice after a long winter, but they're very small and they require long, light leaders and tippets. And I'm amazed at how often I have to explain to people that you don't want your cast to unroll perfectly straight. You don't, the perfect cast on paper at a target in a casting accuracy competition is not at all what you want on the water, because as soon as that leader unrolls and straightens, all of the conflicting currents between your position and your fly impart drag on your presentation, on your fly. And so learning to achieve dead drifts, both on the surface, I've mostly used dry fly examples so far, but also subsurface techniques are also very difficult to get good drag-free, or at least as drag-free as possible drifts. That's another one I would really ask people to focus on, be deliberate in trying to get your fly to slow down as much as possible while still drifting naturally. Again, it sounds really easy to do. It's in reality very, very difficult.
Since we're on the subject, is there anything that we can do to learn more about what a drag-free drift looks like? And I'm even talking about micro drag, because I think a lot of people know what drag
drastic
is,
drag,
but micro drag is much more, clandestine. And I'm wondering is there any way to practice that or to learn? Because even for myself, it's I love dry fly fishing, and I would be willing to bet money that if I went fishing with you, you'd be like, you have micro drag, and I would have no idea that it was there.
And in your defense, I know what it looks like, I think, in my mind too, right? But I still get it. It's just because sometimes the cast doesn't lay out properly, or everybody has it. I don't want to sound like I never get drag. I certainly do.
No, I know. But I mean, even with you, I've sent you videos, or we've talked about videos of other anglers that seem to me to be extremely skilled, and you'll be like, oh, they have so much drag, and I'm like, what?
Right. Yeah, it's hard sometimes to watch some of the YouTube stuff out there. Even my own. I've watched some of my own YouTube stuff that I put up, and I'm embarrassed by it. I'm like, man, it took me a lot more casts than it should have to get a good drift in that. Even in very complex situations, it's not always easy. Like I say, we can make it sound easy in a book. We can make it sound easy on a video where we edit it down to one really good take, right? But it's not always it's very rarely easy, honestly. Ways that you could try and learn it. The obvious drag is, your fly is leaving a wake, right?
Yeah. See, I feel like most people get that one.
I think you're right. The ones that are not as obvious are the micro drag, where it's just barely moving faster than the surface. Other than just having some other sort of reference point, I guess there's two things that come to mind. One is if your cast laid out straight, you have micro drag. Like there are very few exceptions to that rule. If you don't have some sort of slack, some sort of hook, some sort of pile of tippet, your fly is not drag free.
Right. And
so most people are making cast after cast after cast with drag. I like to think of it as it's really difficult to get a very, very, and especially in complex currents, it's very difficult to get a drift for very far. So you need to break the river down into very small segments and say, I'm going to fish like this little 3-foot area. I'm trying to get my drag-free drift in this section of water, right? So don't cast it 15 feet upstream of there. And then, by the time your fly gets to that spot, it's probably going to have drag. You're going to have to lay some slack in there. You're going to have to pile some tippet, etc. The other thing is just finding some sort of visual reference point on the surface. A leaf, a bubble is probably more common, like a little piece of foam or something that's floating, not foam we've tied a fly with, but like river foam, water foam that's created, or a bubble that's created from water rolling over rocks or something like that. And just watching your fly in relation to anything else that's drifting on the surface of the water, and watching how your fly just goes minutely faster. And on really unpressured, especially in my neck of the woods, high alpine fish in small creeks, they often do not care. They will jump on it even if it's got a V-wake like it's a jet ski. They're going to murder that fly. But you go to picky tailwater fishery where the fish see a fair bit of pressure, and all of a sudden that's where the people come into the shop every other day going, I've tried all these flies and none of them work. And you're going, well, let's have a difficult conversation, because all of those work. It might be you. It's hard to say and not have it. Everybody's different. Some people take it with open arms, and others get offended and don't ever want to come to that shop again. But that's their problem for not wanting to learn, right? Yeah. That's the only things I can really think of, other than just time on the water again. And again, if you would have asked me this question 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I would have said I was getting drag-free drifts then, right? And now, if I look at some of those same videos, or I don't have a lot of videos from 20 years ago, but if I were just able to time machine back there, I would look at myself fishing then and go, what an idiot. That guy had no idea what he was doing.
That's bad self-talk.
Well,
I'm working on that also.
Yeah. Well, I'm too dumb to offend myself, so I'm not too worried about it. Yeah, I thought that I was getting good drifts. Let's just say that. And as I'm learning, and I'm sure that in 5 more years' time, I will look at what I'm doing now and go, man, I was scratching at the surface of this. I was starting to understand it, but I have greater understanding of it now. Again, in 5 years from now, I'm learning it just like everybody else is. And when you watch, if you get the opportunity to fish with somebody that's better than you are, I would suggest doing it. And maybe don't just fish with them the whole time. Just watch. As awkward as that can be, just say, hey, do you mind if I just watch what you're doing here for a while, and try and, don't even focus so much on just them catching fish. Just watch all the little things they're doing. Where are they standing? How are they reading water? Which water types are they covering? And on and on and on. One of the things we talked a little bit about leveling up earlier, and like I think you referenced our videos, the Modern Nymphing Masterclass. Shameless, little push here, but Modern Nymphing Masterclass. It's shameless. ModernNymphingMasterclass.com. Check that one out. It's not really well titled. It does have a lot of nymphing content, but it has some dry fly, it has some dry dropper, it has some streamer content. There's lots of goodies in there. But that would be a good way to level up. Another, as I was just referencing, is to have a mentor. Just find somebody that has more experience than you do, and offer to buy their gas. Maybe drive, buy them lunch, whatever it takes. Most people won't need you to do any of those things. Just go. They just want an excuse to go fishing, just like you do, right? And then lastly, you can hire a guide. And when you hire a guide, you have to remember most guides take people that are really occasional anglers. So if you hire a guide, they're going to probably expect that you're in that demographic, unless you specifically say, I want to hire a guide, but I want to learn to fish. I want a guide that can really help me learn this or that, whatever those things are. I want a guide that's just going to help me dial in my nymphing. I want a guide that's going to really level me up in my dry fly fishing. I want your best guide with streamers. And then you better, communicate that well, and be very open to learning that day and listening to what the guide's suggesting, and make sure that they know ahead of time that you're not just there to, maybe you even say, I don't even care if we don't catch as many fish as we, let's say you're dry fly fishing. I know we could nymph and catch more fish, but today, I'm not worried about my fish count. I'm worrying about leveling up. I'm worried about learning something new. So let's just focus on dries, and I want you to give me a tune-up on my dry fly game. Hire a guide, get a mentor to help you with those kinds of things.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And actually, you took us perfectly into the next section, which is invest in your skills. There's a spectrum to this. It's like, you can hire a guide, you can buy $1,000 rod, and you can do all these things and invest in your skills where it's like unnecessary. Or you can do it in a different way, which is the way that we're talking about, which is being very intentional. This kind of goes back to what we were saying before, with how you invest in your skills. Each person learns differently also. So you want to hire a guide with that specific goal in mind, and find the one that's good at what they do with you and the way you learn, I think finding a mentor is like massive. That for me, I can personally say that probably shaved off like 4 years of fly fishing agony in my life. Luckily, I've had people sort of in and around the Chicago area in my early days of fishing that were like custodians of the sport, and really sort of were nice and sweet enough to like,
that's cool,
let me tag along with them and work with me. There was some tough love in there, Ryan Cerrone, if you're listening, but it was good. I needed that. It's like a little bit of tough love is welcomed when it gets you to level up, and it puts things in perspective in like a high octane situation. I was specifically thinking of my first steelheading experience.
Cool.
Where there's a giant fish and I'm just standing there without moving my feet. And I got reamed out for that one. But the other thing to add in this investing part is traveling. And to be honest, I hate sort of saying that, because now that I've started this outfitter and stuff, it probably sounds like I'm doing also a shameless plug, but I'm not really. I'm speaking from the heart when I say, since I've started the outfitter, I've had to travel more because it's my work now. And I made more gains probably in the last year than I have in the last 3, just because I'm fishing in places where I'm experiencing things I would never be able to experience if I was just doing a regular thing without traveling.
Right.
Like fishing for Golden Dorado taught me how important timing is in your cast, for instance. When you're slanging a massive, streamer with a huge head on the end of your fly line.
Right.
And just like really feeling the rod load and paying super attention to when that happens, and giving it the time it needs to flex and for everything to stretch out proper before you start your forward cast. Like those things, I've never had to really do that. Even fishing in the salt, it's like a lot of times I'm using a sinking line and it's just different. It's just different altogether, but I feel like my casting has improved, tenfold since traveling. Also, fishing the salt flats was major game changer for me, just because things happen so fast, and being able to change direction and sort of land cast where you want them to land in a very quick manner is like something you never have to do on a trout stream. You know what I mean? You just don't. But then when you bring it back to the trout stream, or even fishing the harbor and stuff, it's like you're so nimble and you're so much better. It's crazy the difference it makes.
Right.
Also, I think, it all sort of adds up. It's cumulative, You're also better because when you're spending money, you're fishing with a lot more intention, going back to,
Sure.
You know what I mean? It's like all those things sort of inject themselves into the process. So travel was a huge one for me. And I should mention that I had a sort of email back and forth with an individual who was talking about DIY fishing and how it's like the apex of fly fishing and like, everyone should DIY. And I was firmly in that camp where I was like, I get why people get hired guides. Like, that's awesome. But I'm the kind of person that likes to try and figure it out myself.
Sure.
I've always been like that with fishing, aside from my mentors. Like, once I knew enough, I was like, I want to figure it out on my own. Like, there's a certain pride of ownership there. But what I wrote to this guy when we were talking about it, I was like, I used to think that way, but now I've been basically forced to go fish other places because it's like we started this outfitter with Santi. And through that experience, it made me realize how much I was missing by not working with guides. Like, there's just so many things that you pick up that you would never get or even think to figure out because you're a completely different human being than that guide. And that dude is doing it, or woman or dudette, whatever, has been doing it forever, whatever. Super long time, way more than you ever will,
Yeah, or they just know that particular fishery. In some cases, if you took guides home to your home water, they're not likely to teach you a lot, right? Maybe they would if they're really skilled, but a lot of them know right where they are exceptionally well.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's, one of the biggest examples that comes to mind, which is, there's a million of them, but when I went on this last trip for the Golden Dorado, sort of the game there in this particular place is you're casting to a lot of like fallen trees, and these fish are like right next to the tree in all these under the tree in the branches that are submerged. So you're trying to get as close to any branch as you can, which of course leads to a lot of snagging. And Ramon, the guide who we work with down there, taught me this crazy trick to get a streamer out of a tree when it's not submerged. And it's been incredible. Basically, he takes the rod and he puts a bunch of tension on the line. It's like the streamer's in the tree, he's pulling the rod tip is curved towards the streamer, but not so tight that it's like you can't move the fly line. So what he does is he does a forward flick with the tip of his rod tip, and he sends a wave down the fly line, and that wave slaps against the streamer and it kicks the streamer out of the snag. It's absolutely nuts. You have to practice it a bit, but the last time I went fishing was I took a buddy of mine to the Milwaukee, which was completely blown out. It was a total bust. So I ended up just casting into trees and practicing how to get unsnagged for the entire day, basically.
And is it best with, I would imagine it's best with a streamer with a little bit of weight, little mass that'll kind of kick itself off of there? Does it work as well with a tiny, dainty dry fly? Or?
Yeah, I haven't tried with a dry fly, but I think having it be big, it's, it's like...
Makes sense.
The weight of itself, really. But it's one of the coolest tricks I've seen in fly fishing because it's like so practical.
Different than throwing like the roll cast past it and then getting it slack. It's you're under tension.
Yeah, no, you're actually hitting the streamer with the fly line. You're like slapping it. You're slapping the streamer with the fly line. It was cool. I was like, I got to do a video on this because this is absolutely insane.
Cool.
And no one believed me when we got back to camp, and I had him do like a demo, and people's minds were blown.
Oh man, that's cool.
It was really cool.
The Scientific Anglers segment.
Okay, so we are embarking on a new adventure, and what better way to do it than with a partner that we really love and use all the time. So we spent like a really long time sending all these sponsor letters to like 25 Hour Fitness, Gary's Left Shoe Warehouse, Jimbo's Toilet Seat Warmers Are Us, but we haven't heard back. Luckily, 11th Hour Game Save, Scientific Anglers came through, and they are our new sponsor for this season, which is pretty sweet because it feels like we're being sponsored by Mom because she makes you feel safe and in control of your life. But the real point of the segment is to showcase how their gear has sort of changed our fly fishing game. And because it actually has, and sponsored or not sponsored, we would say that. For me personally, it's like one of the most consistent brands that I've used in fly fishing across anything. I would say there's two, and SA is one of them. So
80 years of innovation.
They have had 80 years of innovation, so they're not new to the game. I mean, they were around before Watson and Crick discovered the double helix, I think. So, and Lance, you're actually an ambassador of the brand, aren't you?
I think they consider my status a pro staffer, a bro staffer.
A bro staffer.
I'm with you. They are an awesome brand, and we are very happy to have them on board. And like you said it well. Like you can get sponsors, right? But it's best to have sponsors that you truly believe in and love their products. And so SA makes that easy for us.
That's been kind of our mantra since season 1 is only working with brands that are aligned and ones that we actually resonate with. So this was a really, really no-brainer. So, and as we're putting this together, there's so many options of times when an SA product has been clutch in our fly fishing journey. So I wanted to see if Lance had any, and he brought up this trip that he took to Alaska. So Lance, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about what that was all about and see what we can learn from it?
Yeah, cool. So, as I was relaying to you, I was going to Alaska for the first time, and being the over-preparer that I am, I did not want to be there without all the tools at my disposal to kind of maximize my experience and my catch and that sort of a thing. So,
Hoarder
alert. Yeah. I am not very organized in many facets of my life, but fly fishing is one where I don't usually cut corners, right? So I ended up buying a whole bunch of sink tip lines, 5-footers, 10-footers, 15-footers, 25-footers in various sink rates. I had a bunch of spools. I was ready to roll. I took some floating lines and other things too, of course. So with that in mind, I invested in a whole bunch of sink tip lines from a brand X. We won't say who they are. I don't want to throw them under the bus necessarily, but it was a high-end brand, well-known brand, not SA. Unfortunately, I made a bad choice there. And what I learned was that I had all these lines. I wanted to be prepared for every situation. We were going to fish big rivers, small rivers. I was going to fish shallow, sometimes in big, deep pools and other pieces of water. And I wanted to kind of have the right tool for each of the jobs, which I thought I had covered pretty well. When I got there, I learned that the lines that I had were not very well designed. Sink tips inherently have kind of a tougher design because they have drastically different densities. You have a sinking tip that is literally that. It sinks. It's very small diameter relative to the floating running line and the floating belly. And it's a small diameter, very dense piece of fly line that connects directly to floating, light, fluffy floating type of running line and head. Mm-hmm. So that transition doesn't lend itself to really smooth casts very well unless the line is very well designed. And what I found was this company had basically just taken more or less a regular fly line and changed it from micro balloons that make the line float to tungsten powder and didn't tinker with the taper design at all to make the line be able to cast and carry and hold a loop shape and have predictable turnover and delivery and those sorts of things. So I found that every one of these lines that I had were all pretty rough at casting. They made my fishing much less efficient than I wanted. So I still had a good trip. I caught a bunch of fish, but it was challenging because I ended up spending more time trying to figure out the casting of these lines and in the trees and things that because the line wouldn't carry a loop shape like I was used to, I struggled a bit more than I would have liked. So when I got home from that trip, I wanted to make sure I didn't repeat this same type of process. So I looked into different fly lines, and what I found was a fly line like what is currently the SA Sonar Titan Sink Tip series. And what I found was they had done some tinkering and used their scientific brains that they have over there at SA. With the science behind the sport. They used to do some ads actually where they had their fly line nerds in lab coats, formulating your new scientific English fly lines. Anyway, what I learned was they have lines that are available, scientific English in particular. This Sonar Titan series has a transition from your floating fly line. So you have the running line that connects to your backing that's thin. Mm-hmm. You taper up to a weight forward head, right? You gain some diameter. And instead of just transitioning that right into the super thin, dense sinking tip, they actually increase the diameter of the floating portion of the line to add a little stiffness and add a little mass and a little change in the density and the weight of the line right where the super thin, very dense sink tip connects to the floating line. And what that does is it makes a much more predictable delivery. It's a line that holds a loop shape better. It's not so thick that you feel it when you're stripping it in through your fingers, but you do feel it when you're casting, right? When you're actually making the cast, it has like I said, it holds the loop a lot better. It's just a much better casting experience. It's more efficient. It's more accurate. It turns over with more predictability. And I've really loved that type of sinking tip line since. So I use that same type of line in various sink rates and different weights for a lot of my local waters when I'm fishing, even just streamers for trout. It's actually at Fly Fish Food, it's one of our best selling, if not, I'd have to look at the numbers, but off the top of my head, I would argue that's probably our best selling sink tip series of fly lines.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. Very cool. Yeah, I'm going to have to try that one. I haven't tried that one. I have a different sinking one, but now you've intrigued me. And I like that it comes in different sink rates because I feel like that's usually the biggest problem I have. Like I always just get the same sink rate and then I sit there waiting for 40 minutes at the harbor where I'm like, okay, I'm fishing like 30 feet of water on like a 3 IPS and I'm like, all right, I'm going to grab a coffee.
Yeah, you might as well just cast it the night before and come back in the morning.
Exactly. So it sounds like it's time for me to up my game.
Indeed.
Very cool. So that's our Scientific Anglers segment.
They have been doing it a long time. Those folks over there at SA, they know what they're doing. They always have consistently great products, and we are beyond excited to have them on board.
So next on the list here of things to do to level up if you have plateaued. And this is the one that you've all been waiting for, casting. Practice casting. Do it daily. So I'm actually really excited to talk about it this time because we have something new introduced to this conversation, which I had not experienced before. I think around early January, I started to get like real bad seasonal fishing depression where I was like, oh, I really want to fish badly. And yes, I could have gone to fish. I could have driven up to Wisconsin. Technically, in the Driftless, they hadn't opened yet. They do open in January, but later. Really, I noticed that one of the things that was kind of like killing it for me was just like not practicing casting. So what I did was I got a Practicaster. Now, I was very suspect of this thing.
Skeptical.
Yes, I was like, this thing's going to suck, but like it's better than nothing. I got it. I actually got the Orvis one, which I don't know. I think it might be like some 2.0 version or something. Mm-hmm. It looks like a little mini Helios rod. It's kind of funny.
Oh, cool.
So I got that one. So I got this thing and I was very suspect. It looks like, a cat toy basically. And I've seen them for years, and I've always kind of secretly wanted one. I bought one for my dad. And I think I bought one maybe for my brother and my sister. I can't remember who. But I messed around with it for like 3 days and I was like, this thing's garbage. And I was actually telling Santi that. I was like, he was asking me, he's like, what do you think? I was like, it's probably going to ruin my casting, to be honest. Cause it's like, I'm trying to cast in a room basically. But I was doing it daily, right? I would just leave it in a place where I would see it. And like, I'd be talking to my wife or something. I'd just pick it up and start casting. And lo and behold, it has become like my favorite thing in the freaking world. I'm obsessed with this Practicaster. It's been so entertaining. But not only that, what I ended up doing was I started using it with intention. And that's when the game changed. Completely unlocked the thing. Because instead of just like doing dumb casts, I was like, oh, wait. I started noticing things. I was like, hey, I'm doing a tuck cast inside my house because I'm trying to like make it not hit the wall when I'm casting. And I'm like, I should be able to cast it straight and have it land straight without tuck casting at a shorter distance, So I started like really paying attention to my cast. And now it's like, I'm like working on casting with this thing. I have no data on how my cast is going to be on a real fly rod after doing this for like 2 months. But I will say that I think it's going to make a big difference because I've learned things about timing and rod loading and things I never noticed on my back cast. Like I'm starting to there's a bit of creep, and there's also like I've noticed like on my back cast when I stop, I kind of like will lift my arm up just a tiny little bit. It kind of goes up a little bit. Just weird little things like that,
Creates a nice tailing loop going forward.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm pretty stoked. I've been practicing casting every day.
Cool.
For like the last 2 months, like for real, on that thing, but still. And you don't need that much room. I mean, I'm standing in the middle of like my hallway and it's probably like 15 feet forward and backwards, I'm like working with 30 feet of leeway there. It's been very entertaining and my dog hates it because I just keep casting at him, but keep thinking he's going to like engage. And he just is like, can you please stop messing with me? But I just keep doing it anyways because it is fun.
Or my family's cat would he would definitely engage. He is full engage on that stuff. At Cosmo the Bengal, if you like following cats on Instagram.
Oh, cool. Cosmo the Bengal.
Cosmo the Bengal. He's fully engaged on that sort of thing. Those little rods are pretty cool. They are I first, like, I don't know how you describe it. I created one from I had a guy like 25, 30 years ago make me a 5-foot fly rod.
Oh, wow.
I couldn't find any that were short enough. I thought I did a lot of small stream fishing for a while. When I say small, I mean like ditch, like tiny creek fishing.
Oh, wow.
And I couldn't find rods that were under like 7 footers, sure, 7.5's no problem. 6 once in a while. Anything shorter than that like doesn't exist.
Yeah.
At least didn't. I couldn't find any then. So I had this guy, he basically took like a 10-foot 6-weight and he just used a 4-piece and he used the top 2 sections and made me like a 5-foot, I don't know what it would be. I ended up just throwing like 2 or 3-weight line on it because it's just kind of 2 tip sections. It's pretty soft. But he basically put a cork handle on it, put the guides on it, reinforced the ferrule, put a reel seat obviously on there. And I fished it in small streams for a little while, but it was terrible because it's just too short. And now I'm the opposite. Now on those tiny little creeks, I like fishing like a 9 to 10-foot rod just because the exact opposite is true as far as being able to get good presentations. But that's a story for another day. But what I did end up doing, I still have the rod. I use it for practicing casting. I just attached yarn to it. And if you taper the yarn a little bit, different thickness at the rod end and thinner towards the fishing end, if you will, you can make loops with it, and it's shorter probably than what you're talking about doing. It's probably only casting 10 or 12 feet of line instead of 15, but it's fun, and you can create loops with it and practice your timing and so on. And then just like the Practicaster, like we sell several models of that. I think we have one from Temple Fork as well, one from Echo, the micro practice rod. There's a bunch of different little practice, for indoor in the office, or you're on a conference call and you're bored out of your gourd. You just need to step out in the hallway and throw the Practicaster around for a minute. It's a good use of time.
Yeah, it's cool. And I mean, I'm using it to like sort of incorporate new concepts also. Like, for instance, like the corkscrew pickup. The guy who gives me lessons, John Eulenhop, shout out, Chicago Fly Fishing Outfitters is the fly shop here in Chicago, and John's a buddy of mine, but he's like my casting instructor when I go very rarely, but when I need a tune-up, I'll go to him, and he's really good. And the last time we hung out, he was like, you need to learn this corkscrew thing. So I remembered that in January, so I've been practicing the corkscrew pickup in my house. And so I'm very curious to see how this plays out in real life, but I think it's going to work.
It'll work. You'll just have to adjust your timing a little based on how much line you have out, but yeah, it'll work.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, and I'm sure being on the water, like,
it's going to stick a little more.
The tension, yeah, exactly. It's not sliding like it just slides across my hardwood floor,
Sure.
But that's cool, yeah. And the one that I have is basically like a thick shoelace, and then it goes down to this weird, almost like chenille part for maybe like 3 feet. It's like thinner and
it tapers, loses energy that way.
Yeah,
stiffness.
Exactly.
Cool.
And it has a little Velcro thing at the end, so you can pick up the little fish that came with it. But I don't ever use that thing. I'm not trying to hit fish. Just trying to cast either like around the corner, like trying to do like so it kicks right or left. That's what I've been working on a little bit, and then getting it to land just straight.
Perfect.
That's a new chapter in the casting journey for us here on the podcast, because you've heard us talk about it plenty, but you haven't heard the new iteration where it's post Practicaster. So take that. The next thing in the list here is a really good one, and this is one that I need to start working on because I reached a point where I'm like good enough, but I'm sure that I'm missing a ton of fish, and it's learn to read water better. And you guys talk a bit about it in your videos about the A water, B water, C water, D water, etc.
Yeah.
And I still feel like I'm fishing mainly A, B, and not really venturing past that. And part of that is just because I'm a little confused as to where those other areas might be.
Sure.
So one of the things I was going to ask you was, what's a good way to practice reading water?
I think before you start reading water, you need to know a couple of things, which one is water temperature, because that plays a big role in the water types fish will be in. And the other you probably ideally would need to know or have some sort of guesstimate on is just fish density, because the lower the fish density, the more likely the fish are going to be just in what most people would deem A water, the very, very best plunge pools, the perfect depth, perfect speed sort of a thing. And the more fish per mile there are, the more they will displace each other and they'll fight each other for the prime lies, but only the winner gets it and the other fish get ousted to the secondary lies, right? So if you're fishing a place that has a very high fish density, and you know that going into it, and you're only fishing A water, you're probably missing like 70% of the fish you could catch because they're just in other water types that most people stand in or walk by or walk past, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Walk through or walk past, I meant to say.
That's cool. It's funny, like on paper, I think about fish density, but I don't ever go to a river and be like, okay, this has a lot of fish, so I should consider places I wouldn't normally. Like that's never crossed my mind.
And I don't know that it's really easy to look. Like I don't have the skill set to just be able to walk up to a river and go, oh yeah, this has 5,000 trout per mile. I don't know if it has that. You'd have to talk to a biologist, look at some electrofishing surveys. Maybe a guide has a good idea, and a lot of rivers don't even have that information available. But most of our more popular fisheries, at least in the West, have that kind of stuff available. I'm sure most of the East has it as well. I just haven't researched it as much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you're fishing a place that average volume of water is, let's say, 500 cubic feet a second, and it's got 5,000, 4,000, 3,000 trout per mile, there are fish everywhere. Everywhere. Like if you went and did an electrofishing survey in that stream, you're going to have your mind blown because you're going to think that there's 10, 15 fish per run and there's like 400. And
that's crazy.
And you start realizing just how inept we are as anglers. You start realizing, you walk into a pool and you catch 10 one day and you're like, I cleaned this pool out. You're feeling pretty high and mighty. And the electrofishing survey comes in behind you and cleans out another 300 of them. And you're like, maybe not. Maybe I'm not very good at this, but we'll never catch them all. That's okay. That's a good thing. Yeah, that's something that would not be easy to tell, but if you can figure that thing out, if you can figure out some sort of benchmark as far as how many fish per mile there are, that can help you lead into reading water and know, if you're looking at stuff that, if you could get in the categories of A, B, C, D, E, if there's a very high fish density, there's probably fish in the F water sort of a thing. And if there's a very low density, A or B water, and that's probably about it.
Okay, cool. That's cool. I hadn't thought about it that way, so.
Yeah, we're being, that's a gross generalization, of course. There's always other factors like what food sources are there. There's all kinds of variables that can play into where the fish will hang. But yeah, something to think about.
But there's patterns, and that's the point,
Definitely.
We're trying to figure out those patterns, so. Okay, cool. Well, we've done a pretty freaking good job here. I mean, we've covered a lot of stuff. We have one left here, and it's a pretty good one. It's something that, personally, I think when I do it, I instantly see gains, like within a very short amount of time. That's funny. I've been taking that. My wife's got me on that because we're running the half marathon. And she says, she wants me to recover. I'm like, okay. It's be strategic in your practice. That's what it is. Make a practice schedule. Be strategic about how you plan your fishing, i.e. make a plan for practice. So instead of just being like, okay, today I'm going to practice casting this big, no, actually map that out a bit. Be like, okay, I'm going to spend 1 hour working on just a straight regular cast. And then the next hour is going to be double haul. And then the next hour is going to be, I don't know, aerial men's, whatever.
Sure.
So I think that's really good. I mean, anytime especially if you're going to be like micro analyzing things, if you come up with a schedule for it, it sort of keeps you beholden to that task, because that's the whole thing about fishing. It's like you can get distracted in 2.5 seconds and if you're doing this stuff, there's always something more fun to do, right?
For sure.
So that's the be strategic in your practice. And then along with that, it's time on the river is better than not being on the river. But real time practiced on the river means real gains. So again, work it into a schedule, practice. Even if this is another thing too. Let's say you want to go to a river and you only get to go fishing, once or twice a month, and you're like, I don't want to just be working on this stuff. Like, it's gonna be so boring. You can go and allot an hour and a half to work on some specific skill or new technique. And then once that timer goes off, you're free to do whatever you want. It's like,
Sure.
there's a million ways to do this, right?
Getting your old Google Calendar out on the river,
Yeah. Well, don't do that. Don't have your earbuds in while you're fishing.
No, thank you.
Do you do that? Do you have a scheduled practice? Like, do you work on certain things like that?
Not for a short period of time. I tend to just say, today I'm doing this. I am just dry flies. I am just throwing streamers. Today I'm working on shallow nymphing. Today I'm working on getting really vertical. Today I'm working on different streamer retrieves, and so on. I do that a lot for whatever reason, my personal growth and my plateauing or whatever. Right now, that is kind of, I like to go and catch fish the way that I want to catch fish.
Right.
On lakes, on rivers, you name it. I like to I go to lakes and throw 3 dry flies, spaced like 5 feet apart. So I cover as much water as possible and just try and play with different patterns and different types of water, flats, steep and deep edges, points, out in the middle of no man's land, and just try and figure out where fish are, and then go to a river. And although you could catch a bunch more fish nymphing, I like to just go and I'm just throwing a caddis because there's a few caddis around, or I'm just going to go throw hoppers or ants, or I do that a lot where I'm just really focused on one technique usually. And if I've spent 4 or 5 hours and I'm getting nothing, then I sometimes will tuck tail and go, okay, now I need to catch something to make it feel like I actually went fishing and not just floundering around in a river today. But most of the time, with a little bit of practice at each of those, I've spent a fair bit of time trying to get good at many of those techniques. And so most of the time I can find some fish. Again, not always. I don't always go say I'm going to go dry fly fishing, and I can't always produce the same numbers of fish that I would if I was nymphing, but I can always catch enough to satiate the need that day, right? To make me feel like it was a win of a day, and I had fun doing what I wanted to do and caught them the way I wanted to catch them.
Nice. Have you ever had someone come up to you, like, let's say you decide you're just going to fish caddis. Have you ever had someone come up to you like, hey, you should really try nymphing. You catch a lot more fish that way.
Sure. Yes. Yes, we have had those sorts of things happen. There's lots of people that are the oversharers that don't, totally unaware of what's going on in their surroundings. But usually they're just nice older fellows, most commonly, that aren't even angling. Like on one of my local rivers, there's kind of a walking trail along it. And so people will stop and watch you sometimes. And some of them feel the need to come and offer suggestions, even though they're out for a walk and you're in the river. They like to give you the flies that they used to catch fish on 60 years ago. You ever tried
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. Nobody ties Mosers for like 150 years, but if you want to set your clocks back a couple of centuries, maybe that would be a good one. Not that you could catch a fish on it now, of course, but yeah, that sort of thing does happen.
That always makes me chuckle when I'm talking to someone who clearly doesn't fly fish and they're asking me about it.
Yeah.
This happened recently. Actually, on Friday, I met this guy who's never fly fished before, but he used to fish a lot on Long Island. And he was like asking me about fly fishing, and I was sort of explaining to him why it's different. And then we got talking about, I think, flounder or something. He's like, yeah. He's like, what you should do? You should just, and he told me like the bait he was using and like the hook he was using. And I was like, I just told you this. I just gave you this like entire like half an hour conversation about like how I fly fish and why I like it and how you do it. And now you're telling me that I shouldn't do it.
It's the only thing he knows, right? He's just trying to fall back on what he knows. Here's what I can share with this young chap that make his life a lot better.
Exactly. I was kind of laughing. I was like, okay, well, that's another way to do it. I'm sure it works.
Yeah, no doubt.
It definitely works. Bait definitely works better than flies.
Yep, but it's the same. I mean, I get all kinds of questions quite frequently from acquaintances at family gatherings, or who knows what, a wedding or something, right? And I heard you like to fly fish. Yeah, I do. Well, where's your favorite place to go? That's one of my favorite questions. Like my favorite place? I don't know. Like, does do most people have like a favorite place? I don't really ever think I've had a favorite place.
Yeah.
I like mixing it up so much. I have a hard time answering that one. I usually just tell people like, well, this is the name of the river that I spend the most time on. I don't know that I would say it's my favorite place. It's just proximity and fish density. And, there's lots of reasons I fish it, but I still wouldn't say it's my favorite. I don't know. I think I can't tell if people are just shooting the breeze or they're trying to like get some sort of secret spot that they think you're going to divulge. Like, oh yes, you got to go to this spot because fishing's amazing here. And
Yeah.
I think that kind of stuff is interesting as I've gone through my fishing life, my career, whatever you want to call it, that most places that have fish have pretty good fishing opportunities if you learn to fish in that place, right? Obviously there are places that cycle and some places don't fish well, but anywhere that these days that people are, you're getting fishing reports from on the internet or something, it has good fishing, and you sometimes have to spend a little time to understand how to catch the fish. But if you do that, the fishing's always good. I like to say, people ask me in the shop all the time, "You been fishing lately?" "Yeah." "Where'd you go?" "Oh, well, I went to place X and place Y." "Oh, how were they?" "They were both really good." "Oh, you always say that." Well, I had fun. I mean, how do you quantify really good, right? It's not always a numbers game. It's sometimes, again, how I want to fish, and I had a fun time, so it was great. It's exactly what I wanted to do that day.
I'll throw you one that you probably have never gotten out there in the West.
All right.
I get it almost, I would say 80% of the time when someone finds out that I fly fish, it's usually people that don't really understand or know what it's about, but they've seen it on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And, I live in Chicago, and they'll be like, "Oh, you fly fish? Where do you go to do that around here?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "We're a mile from a massive lake."
Huge lake. You ever
that water you drive by on Lakeshore
Have you
Drive?
looked out your window lately? There's a large body of water. You'd
Never
be
fails.
amazed how often we actually get asked that here, and it's oftentimes from people in neighboring states. Without naming names, Idaho. People from Idaho, for some reason, think Utah has no fishing. I'm not sure.
It's just all buttes and
I don't
desert.
know. It's obviously the people in the know better than that, but I'm often amazed at how many people come in. It's usually college kids, honestly. It's kids that are going to one of the local colleges and they come in there the first time. "Do you guys even have fishing around here?" We even do. Yes, there's a huge lake. What do you want to catch? I've had this conversation with lots of them where I go, "Where are you from?" And they'll tell me a place where they live. And "What do you like to fish for?" And they'll go, they list off 3 species. And you're like, "Oh, that's cool. Yeah, you can find all those in that lake that's like 6 minutes from here." And then if you want to tackle the other 100 species or whatever we have in the state, there's all kinds of other options. So we do get that kind of thing. Again, it's, they don't know any better. They're just trying to strike up a conversation and learn a little, but it is funny, the questions you get. The obliviousness seems to be contagious.
Well, I think the reason I get those questions mainly is because of how fly fishing has been popularized in media. It's
Sure.
The guy in the pharmaceutical commercial with his reel upside down.
Backwards, yeah.
Yeah, not casting, just basically pretending.
Right. Yeah, he's in a car commercial with his new Ford truck on the high bank behind him, and he's casting downstream with a dry fly, swinging it across the current,
Yeah, exactly. And they're they assume that it's in a river in the mountains, and they're like, "Where do you fish here?" And I'm like,
Sure.
"Well, you don't have to be fishing for trout in the middle of a forest to fly fish, But
I get it quite frequently when I'm carp fishing too. When people are like, "What do you you're on a warm water." We have several lower elevation lakes, relatively speaking, to where I live. Lower elevation that that have warmer waters, let's say, or shallower waters where we have warm water species, and people are there catching walleye or catfish or something, and I'll be targeting carp, and they'll be like, "You can't fly pole here." You can't fly pole here?
Fly pole.
Yeah. "Oh, you can't? My bad. Sorry. There ain't no trout in here." "Yeah, I know. I'm not fishing for trout. Thank you."
that's really funny.
You get lots of that kind of stuff too.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, we just added the last thing to our list without even realizing. It wasn't on the list, but the last thing to leveling up, if you've plateaued, is venting with your friends about fly fishing.
Dang, I'm an expert at this one, actually.
Sometimes you got to get it all out. Just clear the mind so that then you can actually fish with an intention and be deliberate.
We don't have enough time on Zoom for me to get it all out, but we'll do it in small segments.
Fair. All right. Well, it's been real. Thank you guys so much for listening. I hope that you have gleaned something from this conversation. I think it's a good one. And if there's stuff that you think that we may have missed, of course, you can always feel free to let us know. We are curious. And also, because we're starting the new season, we're also looking for new topics to cover. So if you have any brilliant ideas, send them our way, even if they're not brilliant.
They will sound more brilliant if we haven't already covered them in previous podcasts.
That's true. That's true. And if you do send an idea our way, don't be offended if we don't use it, because there's no promises in this life here.
Nope, but we might vent about it on the next podcast. So
That's true. That's true. We might. Either way, thanks for joining us, and we are super excited to be kicking off season 4. Lance, thanks again for making the time, and yeah, looking forward to the next, man.
Likewise, thanks for recording with me.
Love it. Fish on.
Fish on.
Later, kids.
Adios.
We back. It's a freaking Egan, baby.